My name's Brian, and I've been married to Emily for about 4 years now. We haven't had kids yet because, if I'm being honest, we're still enjoying the freedom that comes with just being the two of us. Maybe one day that'll change, but for now, we're perfectly fine waiting until we're a bit older, closer to our 30s, before we even start thinking about it. We actually grew up pretty close to each other, just a few blocks apart, but funny enough, we didn't officially meet until a college recruitment event brought us together. Emily, she was always a star in school. She became an accountant and a credit controller, climbing up the corporate ladder through sheer grit and determination. As for me, school wasn't exactly my strong suit. I didn't even finish, but what I lacked in education, I made up for with hard work and a natural instinct for business. By the time I hit 15, I was already working as a cleaner in local offices and shops. By the time I turned 18, I had grown the business enough to oversee a team of 30, managing contracts with big companies around town. Emily and I crossed paths at that college event while she was job hunting, and I was on the lookout for more help with my growing business. She handed me her resume with a sly smile, saying she wasn't really looking for a cleaning gig but figured I might be more interested in getting her phone number. I didn't waste any time, called her before she even made it to the next booth and asked her out for dinner the very next night. 4 years later, we tied the knot. Emily quickly landed a job at a construction firm and worked her way up from the bottom to running both the purchasing and credit control departments. With both of us working and no kids to look after, we were living pretty comfortably. Meanwhile, my cleaning company kept expanding, and eventually, I'd bought out 2 of my competitors, making my business the largest in town for office and store cleaning. In my line of work, it's pretty normal for cleaners or security guards to stumble upon strange things in the offices. It's part of the job, catching the little details most people overlook. About 4 months ago, I was at my desk when my secretary told me someone was waiting in reception. She handed me a business card that read, "Kyle Thompson, Private Investigator." My curiosity piqued, so I had her send him in. After a bit of small talk over coffee, Kyle got to the point. He was hired by a client who suspected his wife might be cheating. Apparently, the wife worked as an accountant at Hancock Manufacturing, and there was this new guy named Jason Miller who had recently joined the company. Jason had a reputation for going after married women, sending flowers, texting late at night, and even taking them out to lunch. The kicker was that he was now trying to arrange an overnight trip with the client's wife. At first, I was mildly entertained by Kyle's little spy game, but then something hit me. Hancock Manufacturing was one of the companies Emily's firm dealt with for sourcing materials, and this Jason guy was starting to sound like someone I should keep tabs on. I asked Kyle what he needed from me, and he explained that Jason had been leaving personal stuff, flowers, notes, on the woman's desk, which she usually threw away. Kyle wondered if my cleaning crew could collect anything tied to Jason and pass it along. They were building a case. He assured me there wouldn't be any legal issues, and the company had already given them the go-ahead. I called the CEO of Hancock Manufacturing to confirm, and he was all for it. So I teamed up with Kyle. My cleaning crew started gathering anything related to Jason and handed it off to Kyle every day at 11 a.m. For 6 weeks, this went on, and eventually, Kyle's team caught the woman and Jason meeting at a motel, which led to her divorce. It was a weird situation, but once that wrapped up, life pretty much returned to normal for me, at least, until something happened that completely shook my world. About a month after Kyle's investigation was over, I started to notice that Emily was acting different. She had always been an open book with me, but lately, she was more quiet and distant. I tried getting her to open up about what was bothering her, but she just brushed it off, saying work had been stressing her out. I didn't push, but the feeling that something wasn't quite right just wouldn't leave me alone. A week or so later, Zoe, one of my longest-serving employees, stopped by my office. Zoe has been with me since the very beginning. She's about 25 years older than me, and we're close. She's always treated me like a son. The moment she sat down, I could tell something was bothering her. "Do you remember that case a few months ago?" she asked cautiously, referring to the investigation with Kyle. I nodded, curious to hear what she had to say. "Well," she continued, "I work in the same building as your wife now, and I've noticed something strange." My stomach dropped. I asked her what she meant, and she hesitated before finally saying, "I've seen that guy, Jason Miller, stopping by Emily's office." The same guy we had been watching? I couldn't believe it. Zoe even told me she saw him bring a massive bouquet of flowers to Emily's desk, and she actually took them with her when she went out for lunch. Zoe handed me a card she found, and as I read it, my heart sank. It was from Jason, and the message was way too personal for my comfort. "Dear Emily, thank you for helping me renew my contract with your company. I really appreciate everything you've done. Let's do lunch again soon. With love, Jason." I was in disbelief. The same guy who had ruined someone else's marriage was now making moves on my wife. I thanked Zoe for bringing this to my attention and asked her to stay alert for any more notes or flowers she might come across. That same afternoon, I wasted no time and called Kyle. I told him everything Zoe had reported, trying to keep my voice steady as I said, "Looks like your old buddy Jason has found a new target, my wife." Kyle let out a sigh, like he wasn't even surprised. "You're the third husband who's reached out to me about him," he said. "Want to join forces with the others?" "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "What's the next step?" Kyle suggested we meet at his office the following day, along with the other husbands, so we could compare notes. When I arrived, I was introduced to Billy and Tom, two guys who, like me, had found themselves tangled up in Jason's web of deceit. Both of their wives had also been on Jason's radar, and their stories were similar: flowers, texts, lunches, and Jason slowly escalating things. We all agreed to work together, combining what we knew to figure out how deep this ran. Kyle laid out a plan. Since I didn't have a cleaning contract at Hancock Manufacturing, where Emily worked, I couldn't gather evidence from her office like we had with the last case. But Kyle had another angle. He asked me who paid for Emily's phone, and when I told him my company did, he suggested we monitor her phone activity. After signing the necessary paperwork, Kyle installed a program that would send all her messages, calls, and emails straight to his team. It felt like a drastic measure, but I needed to know what was happening. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I quietly scanned the QR code on her phone to set everything up. Once it was done, I lay in bed, my mind racing. The next morning, Kyle called with the first bit of data. "Brian, we've found something," he said, his tone serious. "Emily has a separate email account she's been using only to communicate with Jason. He's been pushing her, telling her she needs to spice up her life and try something new to improve your marriage. He's even been pressuring her to share intimate details about your relationship." Hearing this made me feel sick. Kyle continued, "Jason suggested a weekend getaway and told her that if she really loves you, it won't even count as cheating. He's manipulating her, Brian, trying to convince her this is all normal." I thanked Kyle for the update and hung up, completely lost on what to do next. My world felt like it was falling apart. Emily wasn't just flirting with this guy. Jason was actively trying to tear my marriage apart, and she was letting him. That night, she seemed even more distant than usual. She kept her phone close, and when I asked her how her day went, she just brushed me off, saying she was tired. In that moment, I knew if I didn't do something soon, I was going to lose her. The next morning, I couldn't shake the conversation with Kyle. Emily's behavior wasn't just distant, it was starting to feel suspicious. That night, she went to bed earlier than usual, while I stayed up late, trying to figure out what my next move should be. I knew confronting her directly wouldn't work, at least not yet. Jason had a hold on her, and if I came on too strong, I might only push her closer to him. I needed more than just suspicions, I needed real proof. Later that afternoon, Kyle called again, this time with more disturbing news. He had been tracking Emily's communication with Jason and found out they were planning to meet for lunch at a beachside restaurant the next day. Jason was pushing her to discuss everything in person and hinted at some grand plan to convince her that their little affair wouldn't hurt me. His exact words were, "Brian loves you. If you're upfront with him, it's not really cheating." The arrogance of it all made my blood boil. Jason was manipulating Emily, convincing her that what they were doing was somehow harmless, and the worst part was that she seemed to be falling for it. I couldn't just sit back any longer. I called Kyle and told him I was ready to go all in. "If I don't put a stop to this now, I might as well start thinking about divorce, I said, the frustration creeping into my voice. I need a solid plan, something that'll make her see what's really happening before it's too late. Kyle was calm on the other end. Brian, if you're considering divorce, it's smart to have a backup plan. But even if things get messy, Jason isn't going to give up easily. His ego won't let him back down, Kyle said, his voice steady on the other end of the line. He paused briefly before adding, "If you're serious about ending this, I could start pulling together a packet of evidence for your attorney." I took a deep breath, considering his offer. "I've already got a lawyer," I said, steadying my thoughts. "We've got a business agreement that protects most of our assets. If it comes to that, I'm ready." The next morning, I met with my lawyer to lay the groundwork. As we discussed the situation, he gave me a knowing look. "What's changed?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, like he already knew the answer. I gave him a wry smile and said, "Emily's on the verge of stepping out, thanks to some smooth-talking salesman feeding her a load of garbage." I sighed, feeling the weight of the words as I continued. "If she goes through with it, there's no coming back for us." We spent the next hour talking through possible outcomes. I had already taken steps to protect our business assets, and since we didn't have kids, there wouldn't be any complications with child support. We settled on a straightforward divorce strategy: sell the house, split everything evenly, and move on. As far as Jason was concerned, I wasn't planning to pursue anything legally against him. It'd just be a waste of time and money. With the legal groundwork in place, I went home with a clear plan. Over the next few days, Emily's mood shifted constantly. One night, she was unusually affectionate, like she was trying to convince herself everything was still fine. The next night, she barely spoke to me. It was exhausting. I felt like I was living with a stranger. Then, on Friday afternoon, I got a call from Zoe at the office. She told me that Emily had received another bouquet of flowers from Jason, along with a card. It was the final straw. I was done pretending I didn't know what was happening. I immediately messaged Kyle in our group chat, where we kept track of updates. Mark, one of Kyle's associates, quickly replied, "I'll check Emily's email now." Minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Kyle calling. "Brian," he said, his tone serious. "This just got worse. We found a hotel reservation for Emily and Jason. They've booked a weekend at Lakeside Inn, just outside the city. Friday and Saturday night." My chest tightened. This wasn't just harmless flirting or stolen moments anymore. This was real. They were planning to spend the weekend together, and I knew exactly what that meant. "There's more," Kyle continued. "We found emails between them. Jason's been coaching Emily, telling her exactly what to say and how to act around you to keep you from being suspicious. He even gave her a script, telling her to be extra affectionate this week to make sure you don't catch on." I stared at the phone, barely able to keep myself together. I had known something was going on, but hearing all the details laid out like this hit harder than I expected. That weekend I played along. I acted like I didn't know a thing. Emily's behavior changed dramatically. She was overly kind, affectionate, and we were intimate multiple times. It was like she was trying to make up for something, but I knew the truth. She was following Jason's script, trying to keep me distracted while she prepared to betray me. By Monday, I couldn't keep up the charade any longer. I called Kyle and told him, "Jason's making his move, and I'm done playing along. Either I stop this now, or I'm filing for divorce." Kyle agreed. "I'll get everything ready. You need to be prepared for what comes next." The next few days were pure torture. I was watching my wife play both sides, acting like everything was fine between us, while knowing she was planning her weekend with Jason. By Thursday, the tension in the house was unbearable. That afternoon, Kyle called with an update. "Brian, I just intercepted a message from Emily to Jason. She told him she's all set for tomorrow night and is excited for their getaway." Hearing that confirmation felt like a punch to the gut. She was still going through with it. I thanked Kyle for the update, but deep down, I was fuming. I needed to confront her, but I couldn't just spring it on her, not yet. The timing had to be perfect. That evening, when I got home, I decided to take control of the situation. Emily walked in, carrying a few shopping bags, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I greeted her with a smile, masking my frustration. I thought I'd make dinner tonight, I said casually, motioning toward the kitchen, where I had already started cooking. Emily looked surprised. I was going to make dinner, she said, setting her bags down on the counter. I could see the unease in her eyes. We need to talk after we eat, she added, her voice strained, like she was forcing herself to stay calm. Of course, I replied, playing along. We'll have plenty of time to talk. Dinner was tense, to say the least. We made small talk over dinner, but every time Emily tried to steer the conversation towards something serious, I deflected. I could see her frustration growing as the evening dragged on. Once we finished eating, I suggested we take our drinks into the kitchen, where I had discreetly left a folder, the folder containing all the evidence I had gathered. Emily followed me, completely unaware of what was coming. She sat down at the table while I pulled out the folder, revealing the stack of papers underneath. Emily, I began, keeping my voice calm and steady. There's something I need to tell you. Her eyes widened, clearly confused. I continued. I've been thinking a lot about us, about our marriage. It's not as strong as it used to be, and I've been wondering if maybe we should try something new, explore different experiences. I paused, watching her squirm in her seat. Lauren, my secretary, has been confiding in me a lot lately, I said, leaning in slightly. We've gotten close. So I booked a hotel for the weekend, with her. Emily's face turned crimson with anger. Over my dead body, she nearly shouted. If you even... She stopped mid-sentence, the realization finally hitting her. I smiled, still calm. Now you know how I feel, I said softly, sliding the folder across the table toward her. Go ahead, open it. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the documents, emails, text messages, photos, every piece of evidence laid out in black and white. When she finished, she looked up at me, disbelief filling her eyes. You knew, she whispered. Of course I knew, I replied coldly. And if you go through with this, it's over. I've already spoken to my lawyer. For a long moment, she was silent, her face pale. Brian, I'm sorry Her voice trailed off, as if she couldn't find the words. Sorry won't fix this, I said, my tone hardening. You've been planning to cheat on me, and I've been sitting here, watching you, waiting for you to make your move. If you go to that hotel tomorrow, we're done. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything, the lies, the betrayal, and the fact that I had been a step ahead of her the entire time. In the morning, I woke up early and found Emily already in the kitchen, her eyes swollen and red from crying. She didn't say anything, but the guilt was written all over her face. I didn't ask what she was thinking. I had already made up my mind. If she left for that hotel, there was no turning back. Around noon, Kyle called again. Brian, we've intercepted more messages, he said. Emily's having second thoughts, but Jason's pushing her hard. He's trying to convince her that this will bring you two closer. I let out a bitter laugh. He's delusional, I muttered. Kyle agreed. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. Be ready for whatever happens next. Later that afternoon, I found Emily packing a small bag. My heart sank, but I kept my composure. I didn't say a word as she zipped it up and set it by the door. The message was clear, she was still planning to go. That evening, we barely spoke. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone while I retreated to my office, trying to figure out my next move. Kyle was on standby, ready to serve the divorce papers if she went through with it. Just as I was about to call it a night, I heard Emily's phone ring. She hesitated for a moment before putting the call on speaker. Where are you? Jason's voice was sharp and impatient. I'm home, Emily replied quietly. I can't do this, Jason. I'm not coming. There was a long pause on the other end before Jason exploded. Are you serious? After everything I've done for you? You're going to let your husband scare you off? Emily's voice shook, but she stood her ground. I'm not doing this. It's over. Jason cursed before hanging up the phone. Emily turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Brian. I made a mistake. The next morning, I told Emily that if she was serious about fixing our marriage, things were going to change. First, she had to report everything to her boss and make sure Jason was banned from the office. Second, she had to delete the secret email account she had been using to communicate with him. And finally, we were going to start counseling. To her credit, Emily agreed to everything. She called her boss that afternoon, and by the next day, Jason was fired and blacklisted from the company. She deleted the email account, and we started seeing a marriage counselor. Over the next few months, we worked through the issues that had built up between us. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I wondered if it was even worth saving, but slowly, we began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. As for Jason, he didn't fare so well. A few months after losing his job, I heard he had a bad fall at a local mall, slipped down a flight of stairs in the parking lot. The police couldn't figure out exactly what had happened, but I had a feeling that at least 5 husbands, myself included, knew the truth. We were all there that day, 5 men in black jackets and baseball caps, but no one said a word. It was just a coincidence, I suppose, that we happened to be at the same place at the same time. Or maybe it wasn't. Either way, we watched silently, our expressions hidden beneath the brims of our hats. Jason's fall might have been an accident, or it might have been karma catching up to him. Who knows? Now, 4 years later, Emily and I are still together, and we're expecting our first child. It feels surreal when I think about how close we came to throwing everything away. But instead of falling apart, we found a way to rebuild, stronger than before. Our marriage isn't perfect, no relationship is, but we've learned from our mistakes. Sometimes, even when you think there's no way forward, it's possible to pick up the pieces and create something better. And that's what life is, isn't it? Picking up the pieces, learning from the past, and moving forward. To all my listeners, thank you for your incredible support. Your encouragement and feedback mean the world to me. I hope these stories resonate with you and remind you that no matter how hard things get, there's always a chance to turn it around. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Warm regards.